Hello, everyone from the great state of Arizona. My name is Claire Bailey. I'm the Director of Federal, State, and Local Solutions at Compuware, which is now a BMC company. So we're so glad to be here today. Got two amazing speakers. With me today is Ed Toner, the CIO of Nebraska. Ed, would you like to give a brief introduction of yourself?
As Claire says, CIO for Nebraska for the past 5.5 years, and I've been in public sector for 5.5 years. So this is my first stint. I've been in the private sector for over 20 years.
There's always so many amazing stories, and you look back and think it's been 5.5 years, and in other ways you're like, oh my God, 5.5 years. But I know your background, particularly coming from private sector and joining government, we're going to hear a lot about your insight and how that's impacted your strategies for the state of Nebraska. But first, I'd like to talk and introduce you all to David Kennedy. David?
Hi, I'm a solutions architect with Compuware BMC. Almost 10 years of experience building cloud-native applications. I'm a cloud first promoter and evangelist of the serverless movement. So that means no instances, servers, or containers unless there is no other way. And I'm responsible for the development of new Compuware SaaS offerings that augment the utilization of core and legacy mainframe portfolio offerings.
So this is going to be a fun call for everyone in a panel discussion. So let's get started. Hey, David, if you throw up that first slide. As we were talking through and preparing for this conversation with everyone today, this is probably our most favorite statement. Low code is not a zero-sum game. So, Ed, when you see this, what do you think?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I thought I'd actually, the very first time I saw this, it talks directly to the projects that we're working on here at the state of Nebraska. And the biggest one is an HHS project where we actually merged the capabilities of the mainframe backend with a low-code, customer-centric client portal front end. And so when I saw the title of this, it's exactly spot on with our strategy here. And as David says, we're trying to move the front end into the cloud. So it would be a low-code cloud offering where the mainframe is on-prem at this time.
So David, your background at Compuware and just your entire career, talk to me about, because when I reached out to you to be a speaker, it was a great opportunity not only to do additional research, but kind of capitalize on what you bring to the table as a technologist. So what does this mean to you that it's a zero-sum, it's not a zero-sum game?
No, it's a really good question. And I believe that low-code frameworks have two different identities. So identity one is where professional developers can increase their velocity and efficiency by leveraging third-party low-code as a service offerings. And they do this to augment the development process so that they can move faster. And so today there's a large marketplace of subscriptions, offerings that essentially allow a user, a developer, to glue platforms, APIs, and data together seamlessly. Developers trust these services because they're tried and true, right? They've been in the marketplace for a while. And so they're not stuck reinventing the wheel. Right? These are common services that everyone can leverage. But the second identity is just as important, and it's the low-code frameworks that are being built by professional developers within organizations like Ed's. And so these proprietary homegrown low-code as a service offerings enable the business and partners to rapidly build new experiences on top of pre-existing modern or legacy systems. So they afford you the ability to reduce cost, time to market, you get to increase personalization, and also create new customer experiences very, very quickly. So depending on the technical requirements that are needed as a developer, I believe that I'm always challenged trying to do more with less. That's the developer economy today. So I do see a future where low code and traditional software development do coexist and essentially create that zero-sum game where enterprise application stacks include both.
So Ed's got the best job in the world because there you are in the great state of Nebraska, and you have the opportunity to direct and architect an environment that sets forth how to leverage not only the technology you have, but how to make sure that you're managing every dollar that the citizens provide through taxes. So Ed, can you just further describe what you're going to do and what your strategy around that HHS model is, and how you look at how that citizen interaction engagement will be with a low code, no code solution?
Yeah, our strategy is what we're calling is the 360-degree view. And what we're trying to do is integrate the data that we have at Department of Health and Human Services and access that data that's related to the client and use that data to inform our policy and to guide the service delivery that we provide to our citizens here in Nebraska, so that they don't see DHHS as a group of siloed entities, which they are now. You've got your Medicaid and SNAP and TANF, I couldn't even name them all, but we want it to look like a seamless, and we use the terminology, no wrong door. When they come in for services, we collect the data from the mainframe where it's stored. All of those verticals actually store their data in one database on our mainframe. And we're pulling that logic up into that service portal and essentially doing exactly what David said. We know that we can use APIs in that environment. We know we want to do some enhanced work with master data management, with access management, with identity management. We want a B2C component in that front-end portal. All that can be done with the low-code environment in a cloud. And you then continue to gain all those efficiencies of the mainframe on the back end. So we're not rewriting our code on the mainframe. We're actually just introducing a new way to offer benefits with the low code environment. And we're not trying to do everything at one time. We want to continuously enhance and continuously bring more product in, or more of the vendor tools that we can help the customer input their data very easily, validate their data, and get them immediate response if we can. We're looking at everything from all the way to machine learning to actually put things together and make decisions for our caseworkers down the road. So we're looking at it as a very much something that will deliver services very quickly, but we're not going to stop at HHS. We're going to continue on and offer this throughout the state for all of our agencies.
And that's one of my favorite parts of the discussion that you and I, David, have had, is your approach to this builds upon your private sector background, in my opinion, because where is that project today? Like, what are you doing today to prepare for that future of low code, no code? Because we've still got to meet audit requirements. We've still got to understand how we do version control. There's all these components of the back end of a modernized software development environment. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there in Nebraska around that architectural discussion and putting all the pieces in place first?
Yeah, we're setting the platform for, as you said, to use throughout the entire state. And it's very much like our consolidation effort. We kind of felt that what we are is really a business. And a business doesn't divide up their verticals and make it look seamless when they do have verticals. At least that's what we try to do in our private industry. We didn't say, well, you got to go call the debit card department, or you got to call the credit card department, or you got to call the gift card compartment, or you got to go, that's a check, you got to call our company that does checks. No, and in government we do. We say, oh no, that's not my department. So what we're trying to do is, with all of that data, putting unique identifiers in there that will keep metrics and things like that anonymous, and that we can get our macros out of that, and then bring in services that will continue to keep the anonymity of the customer, but at the same time, give us metrics on what's working, what's not working, where are people going to get their data. We have a tool that tells us exactly, it traces all of our contacts at DHHS. Well, it said what we already knew, which is 80+% contact us through their mobile phone. So we're definitely going to focus on the mobile platform for all the agencies, and we're going to move out from there. We have a tax program that we here in Nebraska, both individual and corporate taxes that we wrote, and we're going to integrate that in one day. And we find that 92% of all Nebraskans file their taxes electronically.
Wow.
It's a free service, and it cuts out all of the back end work that we have to do. And so we're going to take that same model and have it, instead of a caseworker having to input the data, we're actually going to have the customer themselves input the data. And of course, from there, we're going to add many tools to help, validate, ensure that the data coming across is correct the first time, make sure that we're not replicating records, which we know we are at times, and things of that sort. But we're not, it's one of those things that's going to be iterative enhancements as we learn more about the product and what we're doing, the service that we're providing.
You make me miss public service. That's change something for the citizens of our country and of our states and all the things that we do to ensure that we have equitable access and bring the services to them without them having to understand that background of government. And David,
exactly.
That strategy, and you understand what we're trying to do across the country to prepare. It's not only prepare our the citizens for that change in service delivery, because it's what they demand. It's what they do today with everything they do, from online banking up to any type of video chat that we've got to have in today's environment around the pandemic. So as Ed is talking to us about all these different components and what we're doing in the planning and building the appropriate architecture, can you talk a little bit about what you see from the technology available today and how that applies to the low-code, no-code environments?
Absolutely. Yeah, so from citizen to federal, state, or local customers, democratization of data is the foundation, I think, to unlocking innovation, growth, and creating an environment that allows you to achieve the velocity that I referred to earlier required to meet the demands of that customer. And so with this proposed new hybrid architecture, the low-code framework focuses on the action and the rules logic servicing that business transaction coming in from one of those entities. So just like a good recipe, right, food recipe, they should be easy to understand, easy to extend, and also easy to refactor. Very simple. If this, then that, repeatable, but these are code recipes. So what this really is built upon is leveraging a stateless model, a stateless architecture, because it's very beneficial for these new services. And these stateless functions are simple, easy to understand, easy to extend, and also able to refactor. Just as the example that Ed gave, there's so many entities, they're all asking the same thing, but there might be a little bit of twist, right? We're going to change the flavor in that recipe just a little bit, right? You don't need professional developers to go make that small change. You can enable that citizen developer to do that because the framework is there, and all those things that you think about of security, performance, highly available enterprise software, that's already baked into the solution, right? So it's really about very simple actions, very simple recipes to enable the people at the edge. But one thing we have to note is you've now created a low barrier of entry. You're going to have higher utilization, and you're going to have that needed compute capacity. It's all going to follow, right, that ease of use. So in this case, what we're doing here is moving the mainframe closer to the customer at the edge as that transactional powerhouse, right? Banks rely on that for high volume, thousands of transactions per second. You now have a service that you're going to be making very easy to use. You're going to need that same safe, reliable system to harbor those transactions.
Ed, what do you think when you take a look at this?
Again, this was one of my favorite slides because it's exactly what we're trying to do. We're putting all the logic out into the client portal, and we're running through the rules engine and doing exactly what David said, making those if then else type questions. And what we're trying to do is right now, when you go to most websites, especially state websites, you have to know what you're looking for. And what we want them to do is have a single entry point, and we ask them questions, much like a business model. If it's someone that's looking for services, we ask them about their financials, how many children, things of that sort, and then we can customize what type of services we have for that individual versus the individual having to pick the services they may or may not be eligible for. So we're making it very easy for us just to gather a little bit of information. And I think one of the things that came up in the meeting was we went through all the questions that we asked for Medicaid, and we found out that we only have three questions different for a SNAP application. So why are we making people fill out 2 applications? Why aren't we just asking the questions that lead us to the services that that customer needs? And as I said, then down the road, if it's not HHS services, is it DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, or is it revenue services? What services do you need? And just make it really where we ask them about their problem instead of them having to figure out, where am I supposed to go?
What's so critical about that right now too is one thing 2020 has shown us is in this pandemic world that we all face together, that all of a sudden there was a whole new entry point to people needing government services who had never interfaced with it before. And I think we saw different states and different approaches to that, and how we could rapidly scale to meet that ongoing demand across the board. And so we've learned a lot this year, but also how do we put that in action for that future? So David, when we go to the next slide, let's talk a little bit about what we see from that architectural component that drives down a little bit. So we've got this, it's all about how we look not only at, now we're shifting gears from the citizen side to how do we empower our developers? What are the tools that are needed that for that professional developer like you, David? What is your dream set and how do we help engage? So we're going to talk just a few minutes about that. So David?
Yeah, so empowering the professional developer, right? How do we empower me to do more, right? If you look back to the 2000s, right, we were building simple, well, I wouldn't say simple, but web applications, a dynamic user interface. But now you shift in the past 10 years, and it starts to get more immersive, right? I can, I think of my healthcare provider. I can text my doctor. I can talk to Alexa. I can inquiry Siri to look at my appointment coming up on my calendar. I walk into the doctor's office. I'm met by a virtual assistant for a check-in. I actually don't interface with someone. There's so many different omni-channel experiences that you have, and there's so much going on, right? That's a lot for one developer, right? Can you really know, can you be the best at all of those? Or do you rely on low code, no code architecture, services, and platforms to do some of the simple automation or even some of the hyper automation, right? Am I going to spend the next 3 years learning how to build a conversational UI and chat robot? Probably not. What I really want to do is focus on the logic that that chatbot and that service offers to me as a developer. And so all of these coming together, I need to leverage these new cloud services that are out there to be able to build these new experiences that our customers are demanding.
Let's look at the next slide because I want to pick Ed's brain a minute. And I would have to say it may take me 3 years to figure out, a little bit older than you, David, so it might take me a little bit longer to figure out that chat box thing. But Ed, when you look across this and you think, again, you're establishing that framework for what's branded the LCAP framework now, talk a little bit about how this applies to you from security all the way to and ensuring that you've got measurements embedded.
Yeah, and that was really what attracted us to the low code, was the fact that there are, secure environments running now. So it has it's a known entity. We know that we can run our HIPAA data and things like that through a secure environment. Of course, if it's cloud-based, we have that reliability, and really the number of enhancements and changes that we make makes the low-code environment much more cost-effective. And I think the other thing that we really attracted us to this is just the ease of use, as the prior slide said, with like smartphones. We live in a rural community, right? We're a rural state. We don't have broadband in all the areas of our state, but we do have and we have a fairly good wireless network. So your smartphone is sometimes the only connection you have. And of course, some of our citizens, that's all they've got at home, even in an urban area. So we really looked at making sure that first it works on the smartphone. That's really our primary device that we're aiming at. And obviously, the other thing that we're looking at is the type of metrics that we can get from that are big. So the performance is going to have to be a big part of our design. We have to make sure that it can be used on a smartphone with a low bandwidth or type environment where they're out in the country, a couple of bars and that's it. And both outside the city and inside. So this really met and checked all those boxes that we really wanted. So it was a pretty much a no-brainer type decision to go this direction.
As we go to that next slide, there's a component here about operational excellence. And I want to give you a shout out and a compliment, because I get to have a national view of generally all of the CIOs, their operational approaches, their strategic approaches. And one of the things key to position you for low code, no code, for that LCAP environment is also just to ensure that you're continually modernizing that development environment. And what you've done, and many others have done, is recognizing that working code is gold and you don't leave out your mainframe. So we also recently in our corporate world had an approach where we stepped back and had a new CEO sit, and he didn't quite say this because he's actually out of Chicago, but he said, "Hey y'all, we're going to adopt Agile. Here's what we're going to." He did not. I haven't gotten him using the y'all word yet, but I'm still working with him. But talk a little bit, David, on what we did, and this is based on our experience in a corporate environment. A little different than state environment, but Ed, you come from that private sector as well. So David, just quickly highlight through this, and then we're going to close with an environment called a DevOps tool chain that we'll talk through. So just a few seconds here, David and Ed, and then we'll shift forward to close out the session.
Sure, absolutely. So, modernizing your development environment and not leaving out the mainframe, right? We, as Compuware, we reinvented ourselves about 6 years ago, and it's defining that desired state that, right, the mainframe is just another compute platform, and anything you can do in the non-mainframe world, you can do on the Z platform, right? So if everyone understands that desired state, you can modernize it, and you can build the tooling and the solutions that are around it, right? When you think about automated testing and building out an agile framework, that's all people, process, and workflow. The mainframe is going to be there, and it's going to be capable of serving that demand that ecosystem, that development environment will bring to light. In step 6 through 10, everyone has to be aware of the technology and the processes that are in place, right? When you have a common agreed upon language of how to speak agile mainframe development, right, you can be very successful. And I can't stress enough around automation, right? In the previous slide, I talked about simple automation to hyper automation. It's automate everywhere. And one of the big things that we talk about today is the autonomous digital enterprise, right? The more that can be automated, the more free time will be to work on that new experience, new innovation that is going to delight your customers at the edge.
So Ed, what's your perspective across, and across all platforms, leveraging what you have and building upon what you have cost effectively?
Yeah, I think one of the big things was we didn't look at the project that we proposed like a lot of people I've talked to. They talk about, I'm going to get rid of the mainframe, right? Or I'm going to modernize the mainframe. And it's all about taking all those, all the logic, all the functionality that's in the mainframe and putting it on another platform. Mm-hmm. And we didn't look at it at all like that. We looked at it as, what can we surround the mainframe with to bring it the new functionality that we want? And when we started talking about it, we actually were modernizing the mainframe because we were bringing some of that logic out of the COBOL code and putting it through APIs into our front end portal. So while we're doing this other project, which really the project was to service our customers better, we actually thought, we didn't think about, well, we're going to modernize the mainframe. Modernization of the mainframe is just going to be part of the project, but not the project, right? It's just a way to get where we want to go. But then at the same time, we said, well, what computes better for our back-end processes than the mainframe? So we kind of see it as, if this was a greenfield, we might have designed it, we probably would have designed it with the mainframe in mind for the transaction processing capabilities that it brings us. So it wasn't a mainframe modernization, I guess would be my big takeaway. It was how do we provide services, the best services that are here for the long term, that we can continuously upgrade seamlessly and add, as we all know, as those new technologies come available.
So David, let's look at that DevOps tool chain, because when it comes down to it, it's about that seamless development environment that allows, that Ed has capitalized on to increase velocity, efficiency, quality, and with that, the overall security of the applications environment, leveraging what he has in place for the state, but also making sure that he's constantly doing that evolution to reduce technical debt, to look at what's that best way to deliver services, but also to process and leverage compute capacity. David, as we look at this DevOps tool chain, one of the things that I've noticed across the industry today is those global organizations, whether it's public sector, private sector, they've created, just like Ed was talking about a moment ago, that seamless architectural environment for development, the modernization of the entire environment. So can you talk about this blank DevOps tool chain and how global industry has applied it, but also governments as well?
Sure, Claire. So any form of development, whether you're building, enterprise software, or you're doing a low-code application, if you're public or private sector, you need the things that are these areas or sectors on the screen. Any one of those applications need to be underpinned by these competencies, right? Any application requires high performance, scalability, high availability, disaster recovery, security, SLAs, technical support, ideation tracking, the gamut goes on and on, right? Because you have to achieve those things to be trusted and respected as a service once it's deployed, right? So from ideation, right, to project management, making sure that your idea is curated, right, and and you have built out the idea to its fullest capacity before putting it into the life cycle of that idea being built, right? So from the IDE perspective, right, do you have all the tools and the capabilities to be able to build that out as quickly as possible while instilling all of those competencies, right? Version control, you've changed something, can I go back? I want to deploy it across dev, test, staging, user acceptance testing before it goes out to the edge to be used by the first user in production. Do you have proper code coverage, right? Making sure that you have unit tests so that you have automated testing. So you have an entire application testing suite to be able to catch things that are easy that your customers will typically run into if you don't have these items. So it's very, very important to surround your idea and your new innovation with these competencies and enterprise-grade software so that your idea comes to life and stays alive and puts that smile on your customer's face when they start to use that new service for the very first time.
Ed, we're going to shift to you as you look at this tool chain. What are you thinking?
Oh, this is a long journey that we've gone through with DevOps, and it's a tool at a time. And what we're finding is as we start to bring in additional monitoring, for example, our clients are now. At first, we did a few demos and things of that sort, showing them the type of things that they can get. Not just from up-down monitoring, right? But I'm talking about transaction monitoring all the way down into the code itself. And they didn't realize how much they needed it until they saw it. And even when they saw it, there was some skepticism of our customers. But just here recently, last week, they were having some slow transactions, and they were able to pinpoint exactly where the code was actually they had put in a new release and where things were, being held up, bottlenecked in some of the bad code. And all of a sudden it was the opposite. It was almost, why didn't you bring this to us before type thing. So it took us a while. And so we have integrated many of these different tool chains, tools from the DevOps world, and right now we're slowly integrating each one in and getting acceptance from our customers, and every one of them have adopted it and really seen some of the benefits that it brings to their environment, especially when it comes to testing, the automation, the monitoring, as I said, the analytics, all of those things. They get monthly reports now from us that they weren't even expecting, and they're learning a lot about their environment that they didn't even know about it.
That is fantastic. And we'll close out this amazing panel. I know we've got some upcoming Q&As as we get into our virtual annual event. We're looking forward to that. I just want to thank you both for a wonderful conversation from both perspectives. From the we're all three technologists in varying capacities, but being able to blend the strategy, the execution, the architectural components that are needed to build the right environment for moving a state forward, and to hear from the background of that David, next generation of person that's leveraging and talking as a technologist across multiple platforms and enabling tools. I cannot thank you enough. And Ed, you're doing a beautiful job for the great state of Nebraska. And if we were all in a room together, everyone who knows me knows I'm a hugger. I would first ask you, I would be appropriately disinfected, and I would be giving you a hug. But I can't wait till we're all together again and working face to face on bringing this low code, no code, old code, new code, kind of like Dr. Seuss, to the table across the nation, across the world, and enabling the better, faster, and more efficient delivery of citizen services. So team, great panel discussion. Any closing words?
Just thanks, Claire and David. It's been fun preparing for this, and thanks for allowing me to join you.
Fantastic. Have a great day, and we'll see you at the Q&A.
Thanks.
Thank you.